Welcome, all pregnant families, midwives, or birth workers. This is Tracy Anderson Askew, your host for the Transform Your Birth podcast, changing your mind about birth one story at a time. Each week, we will be exploring a birth story through the lens of what birth can teach us. I'll be digging deep into each story so you can learn what it is that can change the way a birth unfolds. We can't control birth, but we can influence it. So listen in to find out how. Enjoy. Ebeny was excited to give birth, as she had been at her friend's birth and wanted to experience the challenge. She did the Transform Your Birth course and really appreciated the focus on the partners. Now they were both on the same page. Her waters broke at 36 weeks. She pushed back on induction, trusting that her baby would come when ready. Within 48 hours, she was in labour. She shares with us the many ways she was able to find comfort during a very long labour, her breath being the key tool. During the second stage, her carers were wanting to give her an episiotomy, and she refused, preferring to trust the intelligence of her body to tear. It is wonderful to hear from a woman who enjoyed her birth, even though things got a little tricky at the end. Enjoy.
Before we begin, a note from our sponsor. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. Most of the stories you will hear through this podcast are graduates of the Transform Your Birth workshop held in Canberra. Our Transform Your Birth Today course is now available to anyone, anywhere, at any time, and includes all the wonderful wisdom of this course and live weekly catch-ups when you need it with our host, Tracy. For a little taste, please accept our pregnancy gift offer, which contains free the first few lessons and some essential wisdom for pregnancy. The link can be found in these show notes or visit transformyourbirth.com.au. And now for the episode.
Hello, my darlings. Welcome back again this week with the Transform Your Birth podcast. And with me today is lovely Ebeny. And
Hi.
Ebeny, how old's your baby?
She's now 4 weeks, so
Oh my
she's
God,
just
you're
ticked
so
over to a
fresh.
month. Yeah. Yes.
You're doing well to be here. I
Thank you.
always get amazed when my mothers have that capacity because those first few weeks are pretty intense. So
Don't trust a mum brain, let me just say that much.
yeah. How were you feeling about being pregnant and what sort of preparation did you do?
I really liked being pregnant. So I think at the start, I was a bit like, it was quite a surprise that we got pregnant because we weren't specifically trying, but we were like about to. So it was just a little earlier than we expected. So at first I was like, oh my gosh. But then as it went on, I loved it. I was really excited about it. And, I've always dreamed of having a baby and, actually going through labor itself. Call me crazy. But I've just had a bit of a fascination about, labor and, the natural process of your body going into labor. I think that kind of stemmed after, experiencing my friend's delivery of her baby.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so I was really excited. I guess in preparation, I started watching like YouTube vlogs, I guess, like people that share their stories online of their labor and what they went through and things. So I found that really cool. And then I also obviously did the Transform Your Birth course, which I think that really helped my partner and I prepare for labor together, like as a
Yeah.
unit. And I think that was probably one of the things that prepared us the most for sure, especially him, because having him prepared was really all I needed
Yeah.
during that delivery, to be honest, as my support. So that was a big thing. But I went in premature labor, so there were
Tell
some
us.
things I wanted to prepare during those, sort of 4 weeks leading up to my, due date. Um, so it kind of got cut a little bit short. So yeah.
So tell us what happened then. You went into labor early. What what
Yes.
what was the first signs that your labor
Well,
started?
so I was really ill for 2 weeks. Like I had some kind of cold, flu, chesty cough, bronchitis. I don't know what it was, but it was awful. And then I woke up one morning at 7 a.m. and I had sort of like I had fluid. I'd leaked fluid. Um, And so I called my midwife and sort of let her know and went into the hospital and basically my waters had broken, long
Mm.
story short. And so I was at 36 plus one. So technically 6 days premature. So hospital policies, they have, different things that they need to do for that. So,
Yeah.
I went into hospital and basically didn't get to go home. So they wanted to admit me, antibiotic treatment for risk of infection, being premature. And they also wanted to induce me, to go into labor. So I didn't accept being induced. I asked if I could just wait and see, if I went into labor
Yeah.
naturally myself. And I did accept the antibiotics and I stayed in the hospital for observations just to
Right.
monitor.
So
Yeah,
can I go into that a little bit
please,
more?
please.
When they were offering an induction, how long after your waters had broken did they offer that?
4 hours.
4 hours,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And you said no. So what made you say no, and how was that going back against medical opinion in that moment?
Well, I said no because, as we know, when a woman's waters break, generally within 48 hours, she will likely go into labor. So
Yeah.
in my head, I thought, well, if I go into labor within 48 hours, then that's perfect. Like I've
Mhm.
done what my body probably, is likely to do. And by accepting antibiotic treatment and also being in the hospital for observation,
Yeah.
like much to what I didn't want, I felt like my decision to not get induced was the best decision for me because I didn't want to be induced, go into like ramp up labor too quickly and, start intervening before we needed to intervene.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, and I felt really empowered to make that decision for myself
Yeah.
because that was one of the things that I was like, I don't want to be induced if I absolutely don't have to. Like,
Mm.
unless it's absolutely necessary, I don't want to be induced. I
Mm.
want my body to go through its natural process of getting me prepared for labor. So
Mm.
that
Did you
was
know
the ultimate.
much? Because often women will go down those paths of induction, assuming it is the best path forward.
Mm.
And we've done a couple of episodes now on induction, one with Hannah Darlin and then one with me coaching people how to deal with induction. But in those podcasts, it's very clear that induction isn't always the best way forward. So you must have felt fairly confident to push back on against that advice. Um, what did you know about induction that helped you to feel really solid in that decision?
Um, to be honest, it wasn't what I felt like knew about induction that made me solid. It's what I knew about my body.
Yeah.
So yeah, leading up to my waters breaking, I did have very spontaneous, random, like painful Braxton Hicks that I was, messaging my midwife about like, oh, I'm having these painful Braxton Hicks, and it's like kind of, taking me away. And so I already kind of knew that something was happening, like before my waters even
Right.
broke. Like
Yeah.
intuitively, I kind of knew. And so when that first step happened and my waters broke, I was like, right, like this is going to happen. And I felt in myself that it was going to happen soon.
Yeah.
I was like, I'd be lucky if it didn't, like I would be surprised if it didn't go, like if I didn't
Mhm.
go into full labor after 48 hours. So
Yeah.
that was my kind of that's what I sort of thought. I mean, I know bits and bobs about induction and what it can do, but it wasn't really that I guess was really confident in my decision. I think as well is no shade, but the medical professionals before they even examined me and saw me was said, okay, well we might as well induce her now. So I was in myself, I was like, well, you haven't looked at me, you haven't seen where I'm at or what's going on. So I don't think, you should be making that kind of call yet. And I think
Good
that's sort
comment.
of it sort of
Yes.
influenced me to push back a bit more.
Yeah. I want to clarify that for those who are listening. In hospitals, they have policies, and the policies are based on hopefully up-to-date evidence, you would hope. Not always, but for the most part, I'm sure they are. And it's those policies are really about mitigating risk. And so they give us trends, they give us data around the likelihood or the risk of X compared to Y or something like that. to make a decision based on a policy that's a blanket policy and not look at the individual circumstances of the pregnancy is very poor decision making. In fact, it's very lazy decision making. And I love the fact that you picked up very quickly that, you're telling me to induce now. Is that really the best way forward, and checking in on yourself? And I love what Ebeny's also said about it was her sense of her own body and what was happening that gave her the confidence and the clarity to push back against medical opinion, which is not always easy because these people know things we don't, and we should always have respect for their professional judgment. But it's also very, very helpful, and I would say savvy, to think about thank you for that policy, or thank you for that information. Let's have a look at this pregnancy. What are the signs that my baby might need to come now when I'm really happy to wait and let nature take its course, which is what you did. So I just want to really acknowledge you for that. And I think there's some great wisdom in what Ebeny's just shared. So you chose to trust yourself. How long till you went into labour?
Well, that day I started having just mild cramping. That was not consistent. It was irregular. It was just random. But then the next day,
Which,
so
by
my
the way, is labour.
yeah, early labor. Yeah, there you
It's
go.
early, but
Yeah.
it's a
So the
sign.
Thursday morning is when my waters broke. Friday is sort of when I started having a little bit more sort of period like cramping, and
Yeah.
I was like, all right, something is happening. It's not regular or anything like that. But then it was the Friday night. It was kind of probably around the sort of, 6, 7 p.m. I noticed it was getting a little bit more closer together, still like 40, 50 minutes apart, so it wasn't anything happening.
Yeah.
So then, I was talking to the midwives and they recommended that I try and get really good sleep because I think they also knew that things were going to
Good
start
advice.
happening. Yeah, so I had a little sleepy pill and tried to get some sleep. Not that it really helped. But yeah, so I actually ended up putting on like a sleep hypnosis and lying in the bed and just trying to like get into like a bit of a trance. And I ended up getting about 3 hours sleep. So it
Ah,
was good.
good. That was wise.
Yeah.
It's not always easy in early labour to sleep because
Mm,
there is that excitement, isn't there, that
yeah.
could be
I sent
happening.
husband home. I said, you go home, get a good night's
Okay.
sleep.
Yeah.
Because I knew I didn't tell him I'm going to go into labor like soon. I said, go home, get a good sleep, and I'll call you when I need you.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
So when
And
did it ramp up?
ramped up 3 a.m. I was about 5 minutes apart, and then
Mhm.
it got a bit closer, 3 minutes apart, and then 5 a.m. I called the midwife because like I was knocked to the floor, like I was on the ground moaning,
Yeah.
and the girl next to me could hear me in the room and said, "Can someone check on her?" And so it was about 5 a.m. is when they moved me to the birth suite.
Right.
Mm.
Beautiful. And I hope your partner hot-tailed it
Oh
in
yeah, I
bed.
called him. I called him. I was like, "You need to get here now." And
Yeah, exactly.
he's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Just get here now." Yeah,
Oh,
so it was pretty funny. He was just like a bit like, "Oh my gosh," and then he came. Yeah.
yeah. So what were you doing to find comfort in those spaces?
Like during the sort of labor before I
Yeah.
went into the room. Like so
Or
the
no,
sleep
more when you went into
went
really
into the suite.
well-established labor. Yeah.
So for me, it was just movement. I feel like that was a massive thing for me was movement. I just kind of moved and swayed and like kind of I bent over the bed end of the bed for a very long time. I found positioning really helpful.
Yeah.
Um, Having Ren next to me and reminding me to breathe was a massive thing. Like
Right.
he just consistently did not leave my side once. Consistently was like, find your breath. You're doing well. Like you're doing amazing. Like let's do this. And like that to me was like one of the biggest things that helped me get through. And
Mm.
when there were times where I was like, oh, this is too much, he's like, nope, you're doing it. We're doing it. You're doing well. Like, and just that constant reminder to breathe
Wow.
was massive. Yeah.
So can
And
I
moaning.
ask, and moaning, yeah, nothing like some good primal noises to stir things up. People can
Yeah.
hear women, making those noises and think, oh my gosh, that must be awful. And they can be having a great time making those noises. Sounds like you were. Can I ask,
Yeah.
Ebony, what impact do you think the breathing had on how you experience those sensations? Why was that such a powerful tool?
I think because it helped relax. my body and helped me relax into it. And I think it also kind of reset my mind, like, because the moment I started sort of feeling it was getting too intense, by then just focusing on my breath, it kind of reset my mind and it took me out of that place of, oh, I can't do this, or this is too much, or this is really intense. It took me away from that place and kind of helped me sort of reset.
Right.
Um, and yeah, I think just the relaxation, like relaxing into it and just sort of submitting to it.
Mm.
Um, and I think also I sort of went into a bit of a trance. Like it
Yeah.
was like I was so in my body that I felt like I was having an out of body experience, is how I explain it to people. It's strange.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to word it otherwise.
The word trance is a very good word for it because it's
Yeah.
an altered state of awareness.
Yeah, definitely.
And Mother Nature makes it easy for you to do that by taking you into the more primal parts of the brain. So away from the thinking brain, the neocortex.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It
so
was
that
amazing.
trance-like state is, I would call that the path of least resistance, where women go
Mm,
so deep within themselves, where they're not thinking, they're not
mm,
resisting it. You use the word sort of surrendering to it to go
yeah.
into it and not resist each sensation. Why do you
Mm.
think you were able to access that type of state?
Um,
Was it?
I think because, and it's what we say, I felt safe.
Mm,
I had my amazing husband next to me. He did not leave my side. He had his arms around me, on me at all times. He
mm,
was, just constantly reminding me to breathe, constantly reminding me that I'm doing a good job and that we're doing it and it's good and everything like that. Also, like I had a really good relationship built with my midwife. So
yeah,
like, she was amazing and I also felt really safe with her and I
safety.
felt, yeah, and like I trusted her um with,
Mm,
any sort of suggestion or to do something. There was just like a lot of trust, safety, and love in the room, to be honest.
wow, that's
Yeah.
beautiful.
I'm
Did you
tearing up
do?
thinking about it.
Yeah, it is a very intimate thing. And
Mm,
when
yeah.
you are surrounded by people that give you that sense of safety, then you
Mm,
can surrender more. And that's why it's hard for women when they don't know who their carers are going to be on the day. We know
yeah.
that relationship matters in birth. Did the practices that I gave you play a role in that as well, that training of the nervous system?
Yeah, so I started doing the the practices,
Yep.
but I was very ill, so my
Oh, you
focus
were
went away
too.
from that. But I
Yeah.
definitely felt like the idea of what you're supposed to do really helped me. And
Right.
actually, from the workshop on the weekend, that the Transform Your
Mm,
Birth, one of the visualizations about the jellyfish, I went back to
yeah.
that during labor. I was just picturing this like fluorescent jellyfish while I was
Right.
like going through the wave of a contraction.
Yeah.
So definitely, I think there was a lot that helped contribute to also the way I was breathing as well.
Yeah.
And even when we go further into pushing, keeping the lips nice and loose and those sort of suggestions was really, really helpful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, beautiful. The practices are designed to help people to access the state that you managed to do even without much practice because you got so sick. So
Yeah.
that's
So I think
wonderful.
I did like
Mm.
maybe a week's worth of the practices, which
Yeah,
was really good, and they're really great tools,
yeah.
definitely. I just wish I'd had a bit more time to go through it, but the birth
You
experience I
didn't
had
need it.
was beautiful. Yeah.
You didn't need it because you already realized what you had to do. For some
Yeah.
of us, we need a lot of practice relaxing
Mm,
because it's not our natural state. But Mother
yeah.
Nature wants us to go into that space. And when women are
Yeah.
not scared, they automatically, people who haven't done my course will go into that state
Yeah.
because I think it's the state Mother Nature's invested in us going
Mm.
into as long as we have the safety around us for us to surrender. So, how did things progress to second stage when you were getting ready to push? What happened?
So funny story. We got to a point. So what I really liked is that, in the room, my delivery team, my midwife, she sort of let me lead the way in what like I felt my body was doing. Like I requested cervical checks, but it was never asked upon me. And she just let me trust my body and do what I felt was right. So there was a point where I was like, I feel like I need to push now. Like, is this too early? Should I be doing it? Like, should I just trust your body, do what you feel like you need to do? So there was a time where I started bearing down. I just was like, couldn't resist. I did that for some time, but there was no real sign that baby was coming. So they did check me, and I was only 8 centimeters, and there was some sign of thickening, or
Yeah.
hardening of the cervix. So my midwife then said, "Look, we really need you to stop, try and relax, and stop that urge to push, because we're only gonna, it's gonna be harder."
Yeah.
So she offered then if I needed it, if I'd like the gas or an epidural to help relax me. And I said, I'll give the gas a go. Absolutely no to the epidural. So I had a couple of sucks on the gas and I didn't like it. I found moaning to be more more helpful in going through it. So then I just went on the bed, had a little lay down, got into the zone and just breathed and sort of got into a bit of like a chill state, like where I was just having more like a rest. And I actually got through that time of getting to the fully dilated 10 centimeters. And then I got the push again, the urge push, and it was more in the bottom. Like it was more
Right.
of that poo push that they talk about.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, okay, this is the
Right.
push that I need to have.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so basically I then started pushing for a good hour, hour and a half, and like she wasn't coming down. So I had a baby girl. She wasn't quite coming down. So she'd come out and then she would sort of come back in. And so the doctor came in to check because her heart rate started to rise. So she was starting to show signs of being tired and fatigue.
Yeah.
Um, and so it was getting a little bit like, okay, we've got to try and get her out, more quickly. And so my pelvic floor wasn't sort of relaxing enough to let her through. It was kind of like pulling her back up, is
Mhm.
what the doctor sort of explained in that. So then they offered to do a vacuum delivery, which I was happy to go ahead with because at that point I was absolutely exhausted
Yeah.
and I didn't know how much more I could actually do, and much longer I could take of that anyway. So I agreed to that. They then offered the episiotomy for the vacuum because I could be at risk of tearing. I just politely declined an episiotomy because for me, I liked the idea of my body sort of, doing what it needed to do, tearing where it needed to tear, um, and hoping that it would be a better recovery as opposed to, making an incision. Um, and yeah, we delivered the baby through vacuum. It was all good. And it was great. Like her head came out and then my husband went down and he was able to actually catch her with the midwife and hand her to me. So that was a really, really beautiful, special moment.
Yeah.
Um, and he got to have his moment. So yeah, and I think it was really good. I think at the time, like I had educated myself on, what are the interventions, forceps, vacuum, what does it mean? What are
Mm.
the risks? And I think given the circumstances that we were in, I was happy to go with that.
Yeah.
Because for me, that was the best thing for me and for the baby at that
Mm.
time.
Mm.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Wow. And what was it like when you met her? Tell us about your
Oh my
meeting.
God. I think that was the sound that came out of my mouth. So it was beautiful. So Ren caught her and like actually before she even was fully out, she started crying. Like she was still half in and she started crying. And so he handed her to me and I was just like, oh my gosh, like my baby. And I just looked at her and I was just in like shock. Like it was just incredible. It was amazing because I felt like the whole room just went silent and all I could hear was her cry and all I could see was her. It was just like, I don't know, it was this magical
Wow.
moment. And I think given the whole, experience of labor and then having her there, it was remarkable. It truly
Wow.
was. Um, yeah, it was amazing.
Fantastic. Now you had a bit of a tear.
Yes.
How was that for you? Because I know a lot of women get very fearful about tearing, and I think it's really interesting you chose to
Yeah.
avoid the episiotomy and prefer to tear. So tell us how that played out for you.
Well, it was fine, honestly. So I had a pretty decent tear. So I had a third degree A tear. So that's where the tear goes from, the vagina to the sphincter muscle.
Mm,
But it was only just into the sphincter muscle. It wasn't too bad. Honestly, it was fine. Like I got, so the only thing that I didn't love about it was having to go into the operating room to
yeah.
be, put back together, which was good because then they had the lights, they had,
Mm,
you know,
I could do
a
a good
space
job.
where they could do a good job. Exactly. So that was fine. But in regards to recovery, 6 days postpartum, I went for a walk with my dog, and I found it okay. Like it was uncomfortable and, it kind of hurts to sit down for a couple of days. And, it's not fabulous, but I don't think it's anything to fear.
Yeah.
Um, TMI, but I got a hemorrhoid and I felt like that was worse than the tear itself.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard for women to get their head around it. And
Yeah.
when did you find out that you tore? Did you know at the time?
Yeah, so I didn't know when it happened
Yeah.
because before the vacuum delivery, they did give me some local anesthetic,
Hmm.
um, which
Which
I think was
generally, yeah, you wouldn't
which
even
was
feel
great.
it generally because there's so much stretching going on
Did
anyway.
not feel a thing.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, like, I had the baby and we were like, trying to lead to the feed. And, we did all the delayed cord clamping, all of that. Had the beautiful golden hour. They sort of examined me while I was, with the baby. So I didn't really feel anything. Oh, this was after the placenta, sorry.
Yeah.
And like, I didn't really feel anything. Um, it
Mm.
was fine,
Yeah.
honestly. And she just said, "Oh, look, I think you do have a third degree tear. So we're gonna have to take you into the room to, stitch you up." The thing I was more worried about was having to have a spinal block
Yeah.
rather
Right.
than the tear itself. I mean,
Yeah.
they say the perineum is designed to tear, so I
Mm.
just trusted that my body did what it had to do to get her
Yeah.
out, and it tore where it needed to tear. I actually
Mm.
went to my GP today, and she said it's healed up really beautifully, and it
Yeah.
looks great. So
There you go.
I'm not
And there
concerned.
is an intelligence to the body, and
Mm,
we tend to tear in the place where the blood flows at its greatest for healing. And so,
yeah.
trusting that, and the risks with sometimes, I mean, episiotomies, there are certain circumstances where it can be appropriate.
Mm,
But for the most part, what we've discovered when we tried to overuse them is that they often then
mm,
lead to more tearing as a result of the episiotomy. And so,
yeah.
that's not always a wise thing. So, for those listening, if it's something that you've been concerned about, be reassured by Ebony and ask the question of your
Mm,
caregivers prior to the day, under what circumstances would you want to do an episiotomy? So you can be really clear about what the ground rules are and when you might consider it so that you're much clearer on the day of saying, no, thank you. I'd prefer to tear, please, or whatever.
mm.
But if you do know when it might be appropriate, that can make that decision making a lot easier on the day. Ebony, what did you learn about yourself as a result of your
Oh,
experience?
my goodness. I was thinking about this, and it's a really sort of
Mhm.
it's an insightful thing. I think the one thing I definitely learned about myself and the whole experience is like the power of, thinking with a positive mindset. I think going into labor, going into pregnancy and prepping for birth, I really wanted to have a positive experience because I knew that if I had a positive birth experience, that I would go into postpartum, with bright eyes, and it would just wouldn't not absolutely will, but I'll be a better chance of going into postpartum with a positive mindset. And I really just I think what I learned about myself is that I have so much power in the way that I think, and um also that I'm a trooper. I was reflecting the other day, I was like,
Yeah.
God, I'm a trooper, like what I went through.
I love that.
The
Yeah.
like women are so strong.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think,
100%.
yeah, that was the biggest thing that I learned about myself is the power of my positive thinking and my positive
Mm,
mind and manifesting the experience that I wanted to have, even
yeah.
though it didn't go particularly how I would have visioned.
Yeah.
But that was okay. Like that was the birth that I needed to have, and that
Mm.
was, that her and I both needed to have.
Yeah.
And it was really special in its own mind.
Mm.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And is there anything else you'd do differently or would
Yeah, so I would put a bit more focus on my pelvic floor and
right?
preparing my pelvic floor for delivery because
Mm.
that was one of my biggest barriers of getting her out was my pelvic floor was too tight and strong
Yeah.
that it wasn't sort of relaxing enough to let her come through.
Hmm.
Well, that's what the doctor had observed
Yeah.
and, my midwives and whatnot. So I would definitely put a lot more emphasis on that. I was planning to go into some perineum, massaging and
Yeah.
looking into preparing that, but I was cut a little bit short.
Yeah,
So
you
that,
were.
yeah. So I mean, I would probably try and do that a bit earlier as well.
Mm.
Um,
That's great advice. We had a wonderful
yeah,
speaker on the podcast, Lynn Schultz, talk about releasing pelvic floors when there's that tightness. Often we get told, oh, work on your pelvic floor and do these pelvic muscles. For some women, they need to actually do the opposite. They need to release it. And the
yeah.
best person who will be able to help you with that is a women's health physio. And look for one who can do internal examinations where they actually take a baseline measurement of what the state of how your body's responding to the pregnancy and the tightness and things, and then they can give you some work to do to prepare and potentially create yeah better
Mm.
conditions for you to be able to do second stage without too much fuss. Mm.
Yeah, definitely. I underestimated how hard the second stage was, like the
Mm.
pushing part. I think I probably would have put a bit more emphasis on that as well, is like actually preparing myself
Yeah.
to push like that. It was intense.
Mm.
Not in a bad way. It was just a lot. And it was, I think, harder than I imagined. I thought the contractions would be harder than actually getting her out. And maybe that's just my experience as well.
Yeah.
In my circumstance, like you hear some people that push out a baby in 5 minutes. Like,
Yeah.
but for
It's
me,
different for everyone, Ebony. Like it really,
100%.
it truly is. Like you don't always know how your body's going to respond. And it's not even just about your body. It can be
Mm,
the position of the baby's head and, whether they're
mm,
really, you've got that lovely pointy part of the crown or whether it's a little bit off center and, that's
mm,
a greater surface area that has to kind of emerge through. And so there's things we can do. And then at the end of the day, we've got to kind of surrender into the hands of
yeah.
the birthing goddesses around that. But I love your comment about just how women are really amazing. This morning in my Thriving as a New Parents groups, we did birth debriefing, and there was, I think, 9 women in the room, and every one of them had a different ride. And when you hear lots of birth stories together like that in a
Mm,
sacred women's circle where it's safe and we can be really authentic to our experience, it just helps you to see what a ride birth is. But the power of it is quite amazing to help the mother, the woman become the mother. And that intensity and that testing and the fact that you're not in control is what's
mm.
preparing us and setting us up for dealing with a newborn,
Oh,
because that's
yeah.
what newborn world is like, isn't it?
Oh yeah, 100%. And I feel like, yeah, definitely going into the newborn phase after going through what you go through and having to just be open and like, yeah, okay, let's do this. It definitely helped.
Yeah.
But I think one of the most remarkable things is like your body's natural resources, like the hormones and
Mm.
because during labor I was in this trance and I was, in the zone, but I was also kind of observing what my body was doing as well, like kind of like I was looking from the outside in.
Wow.
It was very strange. I think because I'm so fascinated by it that I was also kind of observing what was happening at the time inside a trance. I don't know how to explain it,
Yeah.
but the adrenaline shakes and like, and I think that kind of helped bring her down a little bit as
Yeah.
well. Like
Yeah.
those different things, it was just absolutely remarkable. And I
Mm.
think as well, like at the course, you really go into, the different hormones and um, brain chemistry that happens during
Yeah.
labor.
Yeah.
And that really was like, that stuck with me because then I think going into labor, I trusted that I didn't need anything else, that my body had everything that it needed to get through.
Mm.
So I think that also helped me too during
Mm.
the labor process.
Wow.
Just a little tidbit just to add on.
I love that. I love your story, and
Oh, thank
I
you.
love all of the stories that I hear, but because it's why I never get sick of doing this work,
Mhm.
because I get to watch these transformations happen, and it never leaves me with any other feeling than total respect for women and total respect for the intelligence of their bodies and what our bodies are designed to do, even when we need help, even if we
Mm,
need to have a cesarean because, of even choice or medical reasons, whatever, it's still a powerful path of awakening.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think at the same time, like I think it was at the course, there was a video you showed of a woman who had been in a car accident and she had a really positive story to tell about her birth, even though it was crazy what had happened, but she
Yeah.
was so positive about the way
Mm.
that she spoke about her story. And for me, that really, really inspired me because I
Yeah.
was thinking, and especially during what had happened for us, going into premature labor,
Mm.
having to be in hospital, like
Yeah.
had these dreams of having, laboring at home and all these things that I wanted to do. I couldn't have a water birth because of the risk of infection and things like
Mm.
that.
Mm.
But that story that she told really inspired me to remain really positive and just, and also to give myself a positive birth story
Yeah.
aside from the things that I couldn't do that I wanted.
Yeah.
And from there, I shifted what a birth plan was for me rather than the series of events that I wanted to happen during my labor. It was how I wanted to feel during and after my labor
No.
was what I wanted, I guess. I
Mm.
changed that perspective and that meaning
Yeah.
behind it.
Which what you've described there is you let go of the need to control the outcome
Yeah,
and
open-minded.
work with what you can, which is you, and how you
Yeah.
perceive and experience it. Beautiful. Well, Ebony's given us some great wisdom through her birth story. She was able to deal with the fact that her baby came early. And, be aware, people, 37 to 42 weeks is the zone. So it can always
Mm-hmm.
happen. Even 37 weeks isn't early, but yours actually was early before 37 weeks. To being able to push back against induction, to trust her body, to use the resources that she had to, manage a labour that went on for quite a while, but she was able to get through it, to then deal with a pushing phase, a bit of a false start pushing phase, but then she started to really work with what she had to overcome tearing and to come out of it feeling really great and appreciating the power of a positive mindset. She's given us lots of wonderful things to think about. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and we'd love to have you back again next week. Thank you. Bye for now. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe and share this podcast. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. It is a place where you can learn, get support and grow into your role as a parent. Why not take advantage of a special gift for all pregnant women at transformyourbirth.com.au? Or if you have children, we have a gift for parents also.